From this week, we'll begin to introduce another model, social accounting matrix, which was another milestone in economic modeling. It won Nobel Prize in Economics in 1984 for having made fundamental contributions to the development of systems of national accounts and hence greatly improved the basis of empirical economic analysis. And in this course, we actually will be learning two theories that were awarded a Nobel Prize. The first one was the input-output model, and the second one was the social accounting matrix model. So, what is the social accounting matrix, or SAM? SAM is an expansion of the input-output model. We add factors including institutions and factors of productions to present income distribution and redistribution. So the social accounting matrix has three purposes. The first one is to organize information on the social and economic structure for a region or country for a period of time. And the second, this model tries to provide an overview of the flows, receipts, and payments in the economic system. And thirdly, this model is trying to form a statistical basis for building models of economic system to test the socioeconomic impact of policies. Now let's talk about the key concepts or categories in SAM. The first concept is called production activities, which we learned in the IO model. They review the inputs and outputs between industrial sectors. Different industrial sectors depend on inputs from others to produce outputs, which can be sold either as intermediate goods or as finished products to satisfy the final demands. The second concept is called institutions or economic agents, including households, corporations or companies, and the government, etc. And this concept is very broad. It represents the different economic agents that interact with each other within the system. It is used to record income distributions along the rows and expenditures in the columns. The third concept is called factors or factors of production. It can be considered as an exchange market for labor and capital. And this concept is used to document the receipts of exchange, just like any tangible market, vegetable market or seafood market. This is a place where exchange activities happen. The last one, we call it others. It is used to mean the rest of the world account. It records payments received by the rest of the world from the economic system. Let me emphasize that in the SAM model, as in the IO model, the sequence of accounts in rows and columns are identical, meaning that it's also an n by n matrix and the sequence of different concepts organized the same way for rows and columns. Let's talk about how the advantages of SAM compare with IO model. So as I mentioned earlier, SAM is an expansion of IO model. It can provide more comprehensive and multidimensional data for analysis. It includes both endogenous and exogenous variables. And typically, the inter-industry activities in households are considered as endogenous, meaning that those are the things inside the system. And the rest variables, such as institutions, factors, are considered exogenous variables. And SAM model also provides insight for direct, indirect, and induced effects. So typically, if you look at the inter-industry interactions, those are the direct and indirect impacts. If you look at households, institutions, factors of productions, those are the induced effects. The first two-way flows we'll talk about are the flows between production activities and institutions. Households, firms, and government as economic agents purchase goods and services from the market to fulfill their final demand from industrial sectors. The monetary flow goes from institutions to the industrial sectors, and the industrial sectors receive the flow of money from institutions for their consumption. The second two-way flows we'll cover are between production activities and the factors of production. As industries produce goods and services, they need labor and capital. When the production activities need labor or capital, they go to the factors of production, which you may consider as an exchange market for labor and capital, such as workers, land, office space, equipment, investment money, etc. Sometimes we call them value-added items, as shown in this diagram. Then workers receive wages or rent is paid for using the space or equipment in broader terms. The third two-way flows are between the factors and institutions. So who owns the labor and capital? It is institutions or economic agents who own these. The economic agents invest some of their money in labor and capital market as endowments. For example, like how our 401k or a pension system works, right? We take out part of our salary and put it in the market as investment. So the money flows from institutions to the factors production, and institutions receive profits or income as a return of investment. So all these links comprise a closed loop of the economic system. The social accounting matrix uses a two-dimensional table to understand how money, products, and services flow among different economic agents. So now let's talk about the SAM table. So this table is an expansion of I/O input by adding more rows and columns here. Let me say that there is a lack of uniform format to represent such a table on appearance. So I'm using bold letters to represent some sub-matrices of the big matrix. Matrix A is a submatrix of production activities between industries, which is the input-output transaction table, showing how products flow from this side to this side here. That's what we learned in the input-output model. And secondly, industry requires labor and capital investments. So this relationship is shown in submatrix F here, where factors of production serve as input for production activities. And here, another matrix, a row matrix 4-1, indicates the inputs needed from outside of a study, the rest of the world, to the production activity in the study area. So if you use a nation as a study area, then the others indicate the inputs from outside the nation. If you use a state as a study area, then the others indicate the inputs from outside the state. Matrix W indicates the relation between institutions and factors of production, where institutions invest in labor and capital in a form of endowment and make profit out of it as income or benefits. And submatrix 4-2 indicates the investment from outside the study area in labor and capital related with production activities. Submatrix C shows the final demand in the form of goods and services that flow from industries to institutions such as households, governments, and corporations. And the payment goes the other way. Matrix T just shows the transactions among sub-entities or institutions such as individuals, government, and corporations. For example, government entities may subsidize some families' needs by providing food and transportation, and even cash sometimes. So such information, such transactions are incorporated in matrix T. And similar explanations can be made for columns others, also known as the rest of the world, indicating how local industries, institutions, labor, and capital interact with the rest of the world. So how to use the SAM table is similar to the IO model, okay, except that we are looking at a bigger n by m matrix. For a complete SAM model, the column sum for a particular category should be the same as the sum for the row elements of the corresponding category. So for example, if you look at agricultural column here, if you add up all the elements within this column, you get a total of 11. That's the total production. That's the total input here. Now if you look at the row for agriculture, you add up all the elements for the row, you can also get 11. This is the total output or the final demand. So the input for agriculture equals the output. And a similar calculation can be made for other categories as well. Now let's review some of the key assumptions for an input-output or the SAM model. First, the input is always available without constraints in supply. That sometimes it's a strong assumption, but in most cases we assume that that's the case for the simplicity of calculation purpose. And then secondly, we assume this constant return to scale. So whether you produce, much larger amount or smaller amount of products, we assume the unit cost or unit price is going to be the same. And then we assume there's a fixed commodity input structure for different industries, which in reality may not be true. But because of the complexity of the data we're dealing with for such a larger table, we assume there's fixed commodity input structure. And lastly, we assume this homogeneous sector output. We don't assume there's any difference in terms of quality or the look and the product that may affect the final demand. Now let's move on to the next video to practice one example using Excel on the SAM model.